End of quote. If this French territory had additional forces along with their local police officers, and the protesters were still able to cause as much damage as they did, what match would we be as an independent country with a limited active police officer ratio to civilian population? Children, friends, and loved ones were hurt in these French territories due to these revolts. Do we want this for our country, Mr. Speaker? As their elected representatives, we should not repeat or condone such actions of terrorism against our population in the name of protecting them from a virus by killing them ourselves if they uphold their right to choice not to be vaccinated. Our citizens' safety and security should be paramount when making such major decisions which infringe on the rights of individuals. Doing this can result in the avoidance of necessary casualties and loss of resources. Overall, Mr. Speaker, I believe that it is in the best interest of the country and its citizens to strive to uphold and enforce proper management of existing regulations and maintain them. Reduce prejudicial disparities in protocols for vaccinated and unvaccinated persons. Avoiding the ill effects of uprisings that may result from the ill-advised proposal from implementing compulsory vaccination of all people. It is evident by the data that I have presented that these have worked in the past and can continue working now if we are willing to put in the efforts. Let us not run ahead of ourselves in this battle, but instead, let us take one positive step after another. Again, I say, COVID-19 vaccines should not be mandatory for all citizens in Dominica. Thank you, and may God bless Dominica.
Yes, I recognize Honorable Jayan Abraham, Honorable Minister for Governance, Public Service Reform, Citizen Empowerment, Social Justice, and Ecclesiastical Affairs. Honorable Minister, you have the floor. You may proceed.
Thank you. Okay. Mr. Speaker of the House of Representatives, proposing leader, Honorable Hanif Gregoire, opposing leader, Honorable Lakia Joseph, honorable parliamentarians, ladies and gentlemen, a pleasant good morning to you. Good morning. Thank you. My name is Jayan Abraham, and my ministerial portfolio is governance, public service reform, citizen empowerment, social justice, and ecclesiastical affairs. On behalf of all these young, strapping parliamentarians sitting here today, I would like to express my gratitude to the many people who had a hand in organizing this historical event and empowering us. I say thanks to my immediate family, the Abraham family, and my awesome community, Marigot, for helping to shape me into the humble young woman standing here before you today. I am also glad to share this figurative stage with my team, the proposing side, as I rise to make my contribution and speak on the topic. COVID-19 vaccinations should be made mandatory for all citizens. Mr. Speaker, with your permission, I'd like to refer to my notes.
Yes, that is okay. You may proceed.
Thank you. I won't take it too long. Last week marked 2 years since the World Health Organization declared a global pandemic following the international spread of COVID-19. When Mr. COVID first came on the scene, I'm sure that many of us shrugged it off, perhaps even made jokes about it. But look around. We are all wearing masks, not only to protect us, but is now hiding the beautiful smiles that God blessed us with. I was off island when the pandemic was declared. I was in the heart of the chaos, the epicenter of the pandemic, New York City. Hearing the heart-wrenching stories from my beloved sister, a nurse, about bodies being stored in trucks because not even the hospital's morgues could contain them, and families never getting to say goodbye to their loved ones, can't even hold their hands to assure them that all is well, or even to say a prayer. We've adapted to the pandemic, and we now live with the new normal. Since the outbreak that started in January of 2020, there was a need to hasten development of a COVID-19 vaccine. And I am pleased to inform this House that on December 8th, 2020, 91-year-old Megan Keenan of the UK was first in the world to receive the COVID-19 vaccine. 1 year, 3 months, 15 days later. Mr. Speaker, I would like to say that we've made some progress. It now boils down to whether or not we should make it mandatory. Mandatory, defined by the Cambridge Dictionary, is used to describe something that must be done because the law states that it is necessary. Hence, it will become compulsory that all citizens receive the first 2 doses of the COVID-19 vaccine and booster shots or face legal consequences. Now, Mr. Speaker, I know that the opposing side may say that the vaccine made mandatory is an infringement on their rights as human beings or contradict their faith, which may not align with this. However, I pause to make reference to the Constitution of the Commonwealth of Dominica, Chapter 1, Section 1, which reads, "Whereas every person in Dominica is entitled to the fundamental rights and freedoms, that is the right to say the right, whatever his race, place or origin, political opinions, creed or sex, but subject to respect for the rights and freedoms of others, and public interest to each of the following, namely, a right to life, liberty, security of the person, and protection of the law." Mr. Speaker, I raise this information to inform my opponents and to emphasize that whilst they may feel that mandating a vaccine is infringing on their rights, we must remember that the government has a responsibility to act in the public interest and is therefore obligated at all times to take steps to protect the interests of its citizens. But in doing so, we must think of the people's trust. Policymakers have considered the effects that mandatory vaccination could have on public trust, where the population may regard this step as another form of inequality or oppression, which might affect both vaccine uptake and adherence to other important health measures, such as social distance, sanitation protocols, and wearing of masks. Mr. Speaker, this lack of compliance, coupled with vaccine hesitancy, will have an enduring negative effect. According to Wyner Harter and Herbal, in the article entitled "Why a Universal COVID-19 Vaccine Mandate is Ethical Today," our choices have consequences and can harm others. Hence, in the event that one person's choice might harm others, it might be ethical for that choice to be limited. For example, that is why we have speed limits and stop signs. Both limit your right to drive as you might wish, but they are necessary for public safety. If you choose to drive recklessly and put others at risk, you should be expected to pay a fine, possibly lose your license, or may even go to jail. And the same should be applied for COVID-19 vaccines, where we should keep in mind that it may infringe on their rights. We should not, in local terms, allow people to take their foot because this indeed negates any gains towards herd immunity, which is the end goal. What is herd immunity? According to Dr. Ashley Drews, Medical Director of Infection Prevention and Control at Houston Methodist, herd immunity is when a large enough portion of a community or population is immune to a virus, so that virus can no longer spread easily from person to person. To achieve herd immunity against COVID-19, a substantial portion of a population would need to be vaccinated, lowering the overall amount of virus able to spread in the whole population. If enough people are resistant to the cause of the disease, such as a virus or bacteria, it simply has nowhere to go. Mr. Speaker, keep in mind that one of the aims in working towards herd immunity is to keep vulnerable groups who cannot get vaccinated due to health complications to be safe and protected from the disease. According to Mayo Clinic, experts estimate that it would take 70% of the population to get vaccinated in order to achieve this, with some estimates ranging as high as 90% worldwide. Currently, according to COVIDvax.live, only 41% of Dominica is fully vaccinated, which has so far dismantled many restrictions and is leading to a path of normalcy. Mr. Speaker, can you imagine how better things would be if that percentage were to increase? At the rate in which we are going, Dominica would have 70% vaccination rate in 755 days, or by April 15th, 2024. 755 days until we reach some level of herd immunity? Now, what are we to do till then? Who else are we to lose until we can reach a point at which herd immunity is achieved? Earlier on, I spoke about the thousands of bodies being stored in trucks. Are we to lose more than that? Compared to Dominica, we did not see this fate. But what about the 62 people and their families? One is even too many. Thank you. We are not exempted from death. It may not be us, but those closest to us. Mr. Speaker, my honorable parliamentarians, it saddens me to say this, but I recently lost a family member to this virus. When you hear about the saying that someone is the life of the party, she was the life and the party. She was the lights, the music, the dance floor, the entire package. And you might have guessed it, but to confirm, she was not protected. I randomly have moments in which I think of her. I feel a tug on my heartstrings, as I do now, which then pull on my tear ducts. Hasn't come as yet, I'm coming down. And you know how it goes. And I think of how different things would be if she were protected. I think of how different it would be if we all were. I even remember the first day I got my first dose, or the day I got my first dose. I met her while walking to my health center, and if you know where the health center is compared to I reside, I would have sweat out that virus if I had it. And the point of the matter is, she completely clowned me for it. With a huge smile on her face, she said, "Cheyenne, when you pass back, let me put a spoon on your arm now to see that chip thing is real." 2 months later, she was gone. And I wasn't even there to say goodbye. Mr. Speaker, I raise this not to compel you to choose or think differently, not to give you a sob story, but to show you the reality. How this virus can affect you in such a cruel way. It can affect families, communities, and it can, most importantly, affect a niece. We have a tool, not a band-aid, that can be used to flip the script, and we are simply not using it. COVID deaths are more than just statistics. They are your neighbors, your friends, and your loved ones. Mr. Speaker, I find it downright selfish for us to think only of ourselves. We need to consider our country, our community, and most specifically, the youth of this beloved island and their future outlook. Mr. Speaker, it is said that we are the future, but there will be no future if we are not there. We should still come together, 6 feet apart though, and fight this virus to better protect us all. Mandatory vaccination may be seen as a means to an end, but it needs to be done for the greater good. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I recognize the Honorable Anessa Laura, Shadow Minister for Housing and Urban Development. You may begin.
Mr. Speaker, leader of the proposing team, leader of the opposing team, other invited guests, the media, and the listening public, a pleasant good morning to all. Mr. Speaker, I rise to add my 2 cents on the dispute of making COVID-19 vaccinations mandatory for all citizens and request permission to refer to my notes throughout my presentation.
You may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Though my comrades before me have already affirmed our stance on the matter, Mr. Speaker, let me reiterate by saying that we are resolutely against mandatory vaccines. We don't believe that mandating COVID-19 vaccines is the ideal solution to this pandemic. Mr. Speaker, in reference to what was said by Honorable Gittens about athletes when considering their career and traveling to tournaments, athletes, most importantly, should have the option of taking the vaccines. They will do it on their own time, Mr. Speaker, as it is particularly pertinent for athletes when they are considering putting foreign substances into their body. In regards to sports, vaccinated or not, Mr. Speaker, athletes can take antigen tests up to 24 hours before the tournament, as is what is required in our locally held tournaments right now, Mr. Speaker. For example, currently the cricket leagues such as CPL in the Caribbean are having their ongoing tournaments in which they create safe COVID bubbles for athletes. They also carry out testing and quarantine until all athletes are medically cleared before tournaments. Furthermore, Mr. Speaker, Honorable Gittens mentioned viruses adapting to their surroundings. But we, as human beings who have changed over the years, we are able to adapt also, are we not? Mr. Speaker, through you, I would like to pose a question to my opponents. Where would the government obtain the money to facilitate vaccination for the entire population of Dominica, which, may I remind you, Mr. Speaker, is just above 70,000 people according to data sourced from the Worldometer and online website. Mr. Speaker, my opponents spoke about herd immunity. But with this vast amount of people in a country, how can we ensure that each and every single person out there is vaccinated? This is absurd, Mr. Speaker. Furthermore, it was mentioned yesterday by my opponent that when COVID-19 vaccines were made available to the world, that there was no hesitation in the signing of checks to obtain these vaccines. It was chop chop, but it was not. Upon further research, it was shown that these claims held no grounds whatsoever, because the first doses of vaccines received, even up till now, Mr. Speaker, were in fact donated and not purchased by the government, as aforementioned by the honorable member. Mr. Speaker, please permit me to quote information retrieved from Media Institute of the Caribbean.com, an online website which stated the Eastern Caribbean state has a stock of vaccines donated by the governments of the United States of America, People's Republic of China, the Republic of India, and through the World Health Organization COVID-19 Vaccines Global Access COVAX facility. It continued by saying that the most recent vaccine shipment arrives here in January 2022 from the United States of America with 32,500 doses of Moderna brand. Before that, the Ministry of Health reported, Mr. Speaker, that it received a second tranche of 64,500 doses of Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine as a donation from the U.S. government through the COVAX facility. An initial shipment of 11,700 doses arrived in September 2021 as part of a U.S. $5.5 million donation to the Caribbean community, Mr. Speaker. In addition to this, Mr. Speaker, with information obtained from a Dominican News Online article dated December 1st, 2021, Pan-American Health Organization's country program specialist in Dominica, Annick Wilson, in handing over the vaccines, said the organization utilizes its strategic fund to coordinate the process, a fund in which all countries of the Caribbean, through the Pan-American Health Organization, participate in as it relates to vaccines procurement. As seen again, Mr. Speaker, it was funded by the Pan-American Health Organization, not the government. Can you imagine the large sum of money that would be wasted if we were purchasing these vaccines? Mr. Speaker, knowing that the majority of the general public refuses to take it, and that the funds could go to another significant undertaking in communities and the country on a whole, which can be extremely beneficial to the youth? I don't know about you, Mr. Speaker, but this doesn't sit right to me at all. As we are on our way to a dynamic Dominica, Mr. Speaker, we need to do what is in the best interest of our country, and that is not mandating vaccines. Modern times calls for modern solutions. So why is it that my fellow opponents seem to want to revert to the time of uncivilization? Mr. Speaker, at a time when they use barbaric measures to demonstrate their power, Mr. Speaker, in which one honorable member stated in their speech, and I quote, and pay close attention to the term used in this statement, we have to forcefully feed them because we love them. Mr. Speaker, if I'm being totally honest, If that is the type of love that they are offering, then I absolutely do not want it. With that being said, Mr. Speaker, I am wondering whether my opponents have done their homework, because it seems to me this math isn't mathing at all. Am I right? For instance, have they calculated the number of booster shots to be administered to every vaccinated person approximately every 6 months? That is in reference to the vaccine not being fully comprehensive and preventing us from contracting the virus. Currently in Dominica, Mr. Speaker, as of last week, Monday, March 21st, 2022, 29,934 people are fully vaccinated. Let's suppose, and I'm just drawing a reference here, Mr. Speaker, if the government were to purchase booster shots for each of these individuals, that would be approximately 60,000 shots that need to be purchased and administered every 6 months. And this is a reference if they were to be purchasing. This brings me to my next question, Mr. Speaker, which is, for how long would this need to continue? Is it for a year, 2 years, or perhaps even 5 years down the line? In relation to this, Mr. Speaker, why is it that we as vaccinated citizens should suffer when this so-called weapon, as stated by my honorable opponent yesterday, should be able to effortlessly combat the COVID-19 virus, Mr. Speaker? Is this weapon firing rubber bullets, Mr. Speaker? And if so, Mr. Speaker, in what circumstance have you ever heard of rubber bullets defeating an enemy? Mr. Speaker, I have stated my facts. I have stated my stance. I rest my case. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Member Laura. We now welcome the proposer of the motion, the Honorable Keanu Winston, who is the Honorable Member of Responsibility for Youth Development and Empowerment, Youth at Risk, Gender Affairs, Senior Security, and Dominicans with Disabilities, to make his final contribution. Member, be reminded that you have 5 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to wind up this debate and thank you for allowing me the opportunity to do so. Mr. Speaker, I would like to commend the members on the opposing side for their attempt, and I reiterate, an attempt, to deter the right-thinking members of this honorable House. But Mr. Speaker, that's just what it was, an attempt. Mr. Speaker, we need the jab. The members of the opposing team are well aware of the full benefits of the jab. Mr. Speaker, we heard it yesterday from Honorable Adams herself, and I quote, "I don't want people to force me to do what I know I have to do." This is a selfish notion. We are our brother's keeper. If you know you have to do it, why don't you want to do it? Mr. Speaker, the honorable member also supported our stance on antibodies and the function of a vaccine to develop said antibodies. That is what the vaccine does, Mr. Speaker, and that is what we are saying. Mr. Speaker, we draw reference to the presentation made by Honorable Maxwell. Does the vaccine truly not decrease the number of individuals who succumb? Where are the research points to support this stance? I didn't hear them yesterday. Where are Mr. Speaker, the herbal remedies proposed by the honorable member, do they work? Are we really saying to this most honorable House and to the listening public that citizens should drink their tea when they get ill and remain home? Where is the local context to represent this stance? Where are your examples? Where has this been proven correct? We await the responses. Mr. Speaker, there are several studies, several scientific studies, which have gone through several clinical phases that prove that vaccines indeed do work. Allow me to read an excerpt from Mayo Clinic. The FDA also took an early look at cases of COVID-19 that occurred 1 week after children were given the second dose of the vaccine. None of the children in the analysis had been previously diagnosed with COVID-19. Among 1,305 children given the vaccine, there were 3 cases of COVID-19. Among 663 children given the placebo, there were 16 cases of COVID-19. The results suggest the vaccine is about 91% effective in preventing COVID-19 in this age group. Children ages 12 to 15, the FDA reviewed a vaccine study of more than 2,200 children.
Honorable member, you have 1 more minute to wind up.
That was 5 minutes already? Oh, wow. That's fine, Mr. Speaker. In regards to schools, where was it said in any of the propositions here today that students would not be allowed to go to school? Mr. Speaker, I would like the members of the opposing team to provide this honorable house, where in the history of schools here in Dominica, that the students were denied the right to basic elementary education. Why am I asking this? There is standing legislation in our laws which support vaccinations for students, and parents have always obliged. What is the difference now? Mr. Speaker, all in all, the science points to the benefits of the vaccine. The benefits far outweigh the negative impacts of the vaccine. Mr. Speaker, no matter what the opposition has purported, it cannot shake the foundation that has been laid by the proposing team. Vaccines are the vehicle to normalcy. Do not miss your seat on this ride. Mr. Speaker, we need the jab. May God bless the people of Dominica.
Yes, this concludes the motion, the debate on the motion. I will now put the question. Be it resolved that the COVID-19 vaccines be made mandatory for all citizens. Those in favor? Those against? For the first time in a long time, I think the nays have it. So,
Mr. Speaker, I would like to move a motion to request a division.
Seconded.
okay, it has been moved and seconded that a division be called. I will now ask the clerk of the House to assist in this regard.
How do you vote?
Okay, so say the name and how do you vote?
Yes. How do you vote?
Honorable members, order please. Order please.
Joseph. Rachel Andrew. Anika Andrew. Adicia Burton. Daniel Martin. Anessa Laura. Gabriel Libla. Zebediah Ja Maxwell. Benton Julius. Owen Jose Maxine. Yannick Regis. Cornelia Adams. Jedediah Farrell.
Nay.
Lorenzo Sanford. Ashma, proposing team, Ashma McDougall.
Aye.
Ashfred Norris.
Aye.
Cadell Coffey. Trisha Yuzem. Trisha Yuzem.
Clerk, please proceed.
Trisha Yuzem. Wendy Wallace.
Aye.
Amika Cognet.
Aye.
Stephina Martin Williams. Kevin Scott.
Aye.
Shema Anil Etienne. Paloma Mack. Hanif Gregoire. Jayan Abraham. Michael Allen. Shay Gittins. Kiana Winston. Trisha Yuzeb, how do you vote? How do you vote? Aye. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 people. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Actually, 16 on the other side and one abstain. So stand and say.
Okay, after the division, we have a total of 13 ayes, 1 abstention, and 16 noes. With that being said, this motion cannot be passed. All right, so we now move into the next order of business.
Mr. Speaker, whereas the National Development Nexus has been aligned with a vision of building better through a new dynamic Dominica, and whereas our development prospect is set against the backdrop of the most unusual and challenging times this country has faced as a result of natural and man-made disasters, and whereas housing plays an important role in national sustainability, and the issues of access to land and construction costs have been debating drives of housing affordability, and whereas, with a focus to build back better and more resilient, Sustainable Development Goal 7 seeks to ensure access to affordable, reliable, sustainable, and modern energy for all. And whereas, although a diverse portfolio of energy exploration is most effective to create a sustainable environment where renewable energy resources are effectively utilized, geothermal energy exploration is far ahead of any other renewable energy platform. And whereas investments in physical capital will make the greatest demand on our creative capabilities, and these are important assets on which our economic and social wheels depend. And whereas the key pillars summed up as comprising 7 development objectives of national policy include economic diversification, sustained, sustainable, and inclusive growth, employment creation and revenue generation, social development, social protection and poverty reduction, environmental management, and cultural preservation. Therefore, be it resolved that government's expenditure on capital projects should be restricted to housing, the international airport, and renewable energy, specifically geothermal, for the next 3 years in order to improve efficiency.
I beg to second the motion, Mr. Speaker.